Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And we just had the September release, which, well, at first look brought lots of small changes in many different areas. I really like the new graphics for the wormholes, although they are getting to look quite crowded and quite busy. Well, it is meant to I think convey at least that it is something special and definitely not your high-sec Care Bear playstyle that you'll find at the other end of a wormhole. So overall, I think that it's a very interesting release. CCP is trying very hard also to help newer players out, so we're now getting warnings in the fitting windows when things that are generally not very efficient are actually chosen by newer players. And then, a bit of a surprise, because I certainly didn't see it in the patch notes, we got that new anomaly, the emerging conduit in high-sec. I would say the hardest and also most rewarding conduit, that anomaly that you can find in high-sec, at least at the moment. I think it will become very popular, especially if I look at how popular scout hunting became all of a sudden. I do fully expect that the values of the salvage and the drops from Triglavian content will drop quite quickly. In fact, that's what we're going to take a look at, or try to take a look at the end of EVE Talk as the extra product. And I think that this is part of CCP's plan. They do want the economy for Triglavian ships to get rolling, and I think that they want to make them a little bit cheaper and more accessible. We should also have EVE Berlin coming this weekend. I'm curious to see if CCP has anything to announce when it comes to either the Chaos Era or maybe the longer term development for EVE Online, because I am honestly very hungry for any information. I still think that asset safety might be in the crosshairs, but we should also be honest, we do see the numbers coming online drop. Part of it is going to be the summer seasonal drop as well, but part of it is going to be the Chaos Era. I myself, honestly, I kind of enjoy these times when things become very difficult in EVE Online, in the sandbox. Anything that you still manage to do basically has more value. At least that's my perspective on it. So pushing through this and still playing the game, trying to now take advantage of some of the low prices, for instance for plex, as we'll see in a moment. You may already have seen it on the ticker as well, but we've gone below 3.5 million on the sellers in Jita. That's a significant drop, and that's a significant opportunity. So any work that you put in the game when lots of people are not putting any effort in the game, I feel like that really helps you get ahead and feel like you're making progress. So the hard times can often be more challenging, but also quite rewarding in my opinion. Next up, let's take a quick look at the new Eden store, if I can find it at least, and see what's happening here. So we still have that new Kimotoro skin that is front and center for Caldari ships. I like it. It's not super special, but the banners, of course, do add a very nice touch to the skin. Then we've got some bundles, nothing too special there, and I'm not seeing any sales this week, so nothing special to report in the new Eden store. Bit of surprise that they haven't done at least a small sale for EVE Berlin on perhaps some skins that might where they might find a relation to EVE Berlin. But all right, no sales, so let's move on to the market. That's why everyone is here, of course. And as always, we are going to start with plex and stuff, and that's going to be at 350. Like that. Let's write that timestamp down, and then let's take a look at maybe we'll just start with the chart for plex. Well, basically a bit of a bump in the road, going back to 3,075,750,000 ISK, and now that big drop here in the last 10 days or so, substantially down below 3.5 million ISK, back to that, well, that low point. It's not yet a one-year low point, about a year ago at the end of the summer. So we should really see that relation here, that the summer in EVE tends to end in October basically, and here we have that bottom, less than 3 million ISK about a year ago, but we're now at 3.25 million apparently on average on the chart, getting very close to that point. I think that is very interesting and full of potential. It will depend a little bit, of course, on what the actual effects of the null-sec blackouts are, but more than that, I think, what will CCP announce for EVE Online coming up towards the winter? I think if we get a cool winter expansion with a nice team, with some cool content projects, I don't know what, I do think that this is a great investment opportunity, and anyone who's not playing the game now, well, will obviously miss that one. In Jita, we're talking less than 3.5 million for the sellers, and then 3,158,000. That's getting very close to 3 million actually on the buyers as well. If we go take a look at the Tranquility Trade Towers and the surrounding player-owned trade hubs, we go down to less than 3.4 million for the sellers. What was the peak at? 4.5 million on a couple of days. That is a very, very big drop. That's a very big difference, and part of the result of, well, the drop in player activity. It is a seasonal thing. It's absolutely part of the game, but also the chaos era, which, well, those Triglaven Scout patrols making AFK mining in highsec harder, AFK ratting perhaps as well. I'm not sure if anyone does that, but I had a report from one of the viewers, a comment that said that they actually went and caught him in a signature that he scanned down, so they do really look for you. And that makes AFK activity a lot harder. And then of course in nullsec we have local gone, so far more risk there as well, which generally means that ISK has more value, and so people are not just gonna give it away for plex at this point anymore either. And yeah, the price drops substantially. Look at that chart. When it comes to the buyers, well, 3.2 million is what people are willing to pay in the Tranquility Trade Towers. A lot better and more affordable than, of course, the 4.5 million we had before. Perhaps I should do a quick times 500. Do we have a calculator? Normally we have that in utilities. Yeah, there we go. Let's say 3.4. So you can even buy these for less than that. Then we'll do times 500. And that means 1.7 billion ISK for a month game time, for a month Omega time. That's a substantial drop away from the 2 billion mark. And I think if we look at it from the historical perspective, this is still somewhat expensive, but doable, not exaggerated, not inflating into infinity. And this is a pretty sharp drop off. Yeah, very, very nice, I think, for people that want to either plex their accounts. As I've said, whatever you do in the game now does seem to have a lot more value, or of course people that are looking for an investment. I think that this chart looks very interesting. Keep one eye on the start of the year as well. If we get to 3 million, I think that it's a no-brainer, and even I am then going to have to start buying some of those plexes as well. Next up, the multiple pilot train certificates staying below 1.5 billion ISK. The volumes have dropped to next to nothing at this point. We're talking 1.46 billion for the sellers and less than 1.4 billion for the buyers. Even a premium on 30 days trading time for a character compared to plex at this point. Still recovering probably a little bit for that sale. The big problem, of course, is that the sale does attract very big volumes, but that's not something that in even a couple of months the market can fully absorb. So I do think that we'll see a slight correction upwards. It is absolutely possible here. Next up, we have the skill extractor dropping off as well, doing that second dip, a little bit of a different one because we are getting closer to a low point for the year here as well already. Although we started at less than 350 million ISK, sellers are coming in at 372 million, buyers at 362, so we still have a ways to go to get back to last year's dip, but it is entirely possible in my opinion. A little bit more chaos might just do it, and the Sino change just came in as well. It doesn't affect me personally, but it is of course also one of the really big changes when it comes to nullsec and the chaos era that has dropped in the September release. We'll have to see on the impact for all of this, I think, after the summer, so that we can have a good idea of what the impact has been for just the summer decrease in activity and what the nullsec blackout has actually done for the game. Next up, the skill injectors. Here are the large skill injectors also dipping down and going to less than 800 million ISK. Definitely an important barrier to break here all of a sudden. Last year we started at 700 million ISK. We're now at 798 for the sellers and 775 for the first buyer, dropping down to 770 for a lot of them. And I think that the large scale injectors are basically your larger scale inflation protection investments. So if you want to make that investment with a little bit of added risk, right? I think plex is basically the number one inflation hedge, but it's only that. And the large scale injectors still have a little bit of speculation. If CCP, for instance, then brings out perhaps triglavian capital ships or something like that, all of a sudden that's gonna be new skills, that's gonna be added demand for skill points for sure, and so that is that added boost that you can potentially get from large scale injectors, which is why I would wait for these to drop a little bit lower, right? The closer we get to 700 million, the better, and then perhaps start investing in some of these at this point. Now we have the small scale injector that's actually going up a little bit in the last couple of days. Very interesting. Is it because it's slightly more affordable or in better volumes? I don't know. 166.5 million for the sellers and 151 million for the buyers. A little bit more margin here again as well, so potentially we could actually drop to new lows from these as well, I think. And now we have the daily alpha injector that is also still trading below average, just about 50 million ISK, 56 for the sellers, 51 for the buyers. I'd put the average at 60 million, and this is the first one that's actually lower than the price it started at a year ago. Is this a sign that potentially we could get there for plex as well, and skill extractors, skill injectors perhaps? I think that's going to be very, very difficult to do, but plex with a bit more momentum could really get close to 3 million ISK, and I think considering that we're going for 3.4 to 3.2 million already for the buyers, we could get very close to that, I think. Next up, we have the mineral market coming in at 1150. Like that. As always, we will start with tritanium that has held on to the price in the market ticker, at least 695 for the sellers, buyers coming in at 635. That's a little bit of a margin that's opening up. You can see that the average prices are struggling to maintain their closeness to 7 ISK, but so far the sellers have just been able to not budge, and this I think is another very good sign. If plex go down in value that much and tritanium still stays at close to 7 ISK, it normally means that mining actually has a lot more value. You don't need to mine as much by a very, very large margin in order to basically plex an account. It's a calculation. I wouldn't recommend anyone try to do that, especially not in like a venture or something like that, but it's a calculation that you can make in your head that shows that, well, tritanium is actually very expensive at the moment, so any tritanium that you can make and bring to the market is actually quite valuable for the economy right now, and 7 ISK, even historically speaking, is a pretty damn good price for tritanium. Next up, we have pyrite that is, well, back from its high point, you could say, at 5.5 ISK, which historically is quite terrible, managing now to hold on to 4.5 ISK. So we're talking 4.8 for the sellers, 4.3 for the buyers. Again, a bit of margin opening up here. So there is some danger that just the lack of demand is going to end up causing problems for the price of minerals, but for now this is still quite reasonable and away from the lows as well. Then we have Mexalon that was dropping to a 1-year low point and is still doing so, so that value is just going off a cliff, heading for 45 ISK at this point. We're talking 48.4 for the sellers and 44.4 for the buyers. Definitely something that is completely counter to most of the other minerals at this point that are at least defending their price ranges. We've got Mexalon that is doing a complete 180, started the year at 70 ISK despite all the problems in the mineral market in general, and actually somehow had this premium and had this ability to really defend its price, even its historical price of 60 to 70 ISK, very well. And now somehow something has obviously changed here, and it is dropping off a cliff, heading for a 1-year low point. My personal theory here is going to be moon mining, that the players have basically adapted to the changes in nullsec, the extra danger as well from scouts in highsec, and really switched a lot of their activities to moon mining, which gives them the ability to decide on the mineral mix, at least to some extent, when it comes to what is being mined in the moons. And thus I think that Mexalon in nullsec will have gotten a lot of priority. It was basically the bottleneck for their production, and they're now able to rectify that problem by focusing more on moon mining and grabbing just a couple of extra moons that are good Mexalon sources that can already make the difference, in my opinion. Then we've got Isogen, the poor Isogen, I think the biggest casualty of the Rorcal, you could say. But it's not just Rorcal, it's moon mining as well. It's the changes to a mineral mix that happened quite a while ago. All of that led to Isogen becoming super abundant. You can see that we started here at 27.5, and even that is a terrible price. This used to cost a lot more than Mexalon even, and yeah, just continuing to stay just above 50 in ISK at 16 for the sellers and 15 for the buyers, but it's a very low price. It is the most abundant mineral compared to the needs of the game at the moment. Then we have Noxium, which last week dropped off as well and is still dropping off. Okay, another one that actually did really decently well, managing to hold on to the 3 to 325 ISK range for most of the year. Is now also dropping off to 250 all of a sudden. 269 for the sellers, 233 for the buyers. I think the same theory can hold up here. Any mineral that has actually managed to maintain its price decently well despite all the problems tends to be something that is not as easy to grab, so needs a little bit of attention, perhaps some imports when you're going all out. Now that, well, there's little need, I think, to go all out at the moment in nullsec, and as a result they can easily tweak their moon mining activities to make up for that, and as a result Noxium is losing value as well. After that we've got Zydrine from nullsec, went from 500 to 450 in a short amount of time. A little bounce to be spotted here. Sellers are at 489 for most of them. One is coming in at 451. Basically that's the margin, because 451 is what most buyers are at. So Zydrine trying to defend 450. But sellers are just not having it. They're actually opening up a margin on this one because we just declined so sharply. After that we have Megasite that is continuing to decline, also getting very close to 1 year low point at this time. 366 for the sellers and 366 for the buyers. So buyers are starting to step in here on this 1 year low point. I do think that 350 will be easily defended, but it's not a good time to be a mineral that's become really very available through moon mining. And I think this is part of what I've said, that players have moved away from mining in just random belts and moved towards a more regulated and a more organized moon mining activity across the board. After that we still have Morphite, which is still doing very well, staying at 12,500 ISK. I'm not sure if you can actually have Morphite from moons. Perhaps in low nullsec it is possible, but I certainly haven't seen it in the system of Vital when I was scanning that down, and we're in fact talking 13,300 ISK for the sellers, 12,000 ISK for the buyers. Man, that is one investment we should have made in May. That is a massive comeback. We should mention again that Morphite is different from all the other minerals. You don't need it in order to produce Tech 1 chips, you need it in order to produce Tech 2 chips. So it is a different type of mineral, but it is nonetheless classified as a mineral because it is just mined basically like the others. And this one is doing really well. 1 year high point, selling for more than 13,000 ISK. That would have been pretty much a 90% profit here over the course of 5 months. That is not bad at all. Again, also I think showing the value of still going out there and grabbing more fight. Well, that's making you quite a bit of ISK at the moment. Next up, the PI market coming in at 1850. Alright, 50 again. Here, my theory would be that we are finally going to start to see the exact opposite, a far more passive production cycle for PI with a dropping amount of people that are actively playing, which has been stalled in my opinion over the summer with the skilling spree, should now start to get under pressure. And so perhaps some sort of September bottoms investment opportunities might show up. That would be my expectation. Let's see if it's happening. Here in the broadcast notes, I was definitely seeing some pressure. Is it really that bad? Well, I would need to see buyers basically below 1.75 million on this chart to say that, yeah, it is getting to that point. And we're not there just yet. It's basically sellers that have dropped to less than 2 million ISK. Buyers are still at 1.8 million, a little bit above that. And so broadcast notes are obviously under pressure. More supplies coming in than can be absorbed. So that price has gone down to less than 2 million below the average. But it's the bottom hasn't fallen out yet, which is honestly what I would wait for before I start to invest in some of these PI materials. Construction blocks also under pressure, quite visibly so. 10k on a couple of days for the average, which means that sellers are coming in at 10,400 and then even dropping down to 10,153, and the buyers are also at 10,153. And here is that first sign, right? You don't see that many buy orders for construction blocks. Now, once this gets a bit more pressure and these drop off, if you can then buy construction blocks for less than 10,000 disc, and the lower of course the better, that's when it starts to be interesting. So still a little bit of patience, but you can start to see with these sell orders here, I think, let's take a look in the player trade hubs, that's hardly relevant, that pressure is on, and eventually someone is going to come in and just fill these orders as well. And if demand doesn't show up but supply stays steady, which I think it does because it is basically a very passive thing to produce, then we will see that opportunity show up. So yeah, September, late September, and of course the announcement from CCP, all of that could mean massive opportunities for investments, I think, in the PI market. Next up we have consumer electronics, and here we see it materialize, I think, for the first time. We're clearly dropping off to a one-year low point. We've done so as well in January, and look, if you could have bought here for, let's say, less than 11,000 disc and then sell here for 14k, that's a nice 50% profit. No, not exactly, a bit less than that, but it's definitely a nice trade to make. And here we are again. What are the numbers? 10,900 for the first seller, most still at 11,400, but you're buying for 10,850, so you're obviously buying below the entire chart at less than 11,000 disc. I would say a first investment could start to be made in consumer electronics for less than 11,000 disc. You can basically do so right now. I think it is an opportunity, and it is also one that starts to show that yeah, the summer PI has held on very well, I think, due to the skilling spree. Now that when we get to the late summer and we actually get to that impact on the player base, the opportunities will start to arise. Coolants, fuel related, I think that's a little bit different because there is always destruction and demand for these types of materials. So this one is still doing pretty well on the chart, staying well above 11k, 11,500 for the sellers, but demand though, less than 10,000 disc for the buyers. So that is dropping off here as well. It's just that the sellers know that you need, I think, coolants for your fuels no matter what, and so that is going to stay up a little bit better. But we are buying for less than 10,000 discs, so there's obviously a bit of a lack of demand starting to show up here as well. Enriched uranium, the complete opposite, is staying at 15,000 discs, quite a premium, close to one-year high point, 15,500 for the sellers, 14,700 for the buyers. So that would be well, a bit of a time investment and a bit of gameplay as well. But if you could somehow switch to some good enriched uranium production facilities, you could make a lot more ISK than, let's say, construction blocks, consumer electronics, coolants, and things like that. This is close to a one-year high point again. This went up to 16,000 in March, but this is a very, very good price, of course. Then integrity response drones, you can see the pressure again here in August and building a little bit more in September, but hesitating to get to a real low point. Still 2.4 million for the sellers and less than 2.2 million for the buyers. So let's see if I can get something less than 2.2 million for the buyers. Well, that is starting to be pretty low as well. I'd love to see it drop even lower to less than 2.1 or something like that to really, you know, show that this is a one low point, an obvious opportunity. That's not materializing just yet, but the lack of demand, I think, is clearly visible here as well. Then we have our mechanical parts, less than 10k. That's a sharp drop off. This is the first one, despite the fact that it is fuel related, where we obviously have a very pronounced low point. Sellers coming in and competing at less than 10,000 disc. They've been forced to drive the price back down if you still want to sell any of that, and thus buyers are comfortably going to less than 9,800 disc. We need just a couple to be gone here, just one basically, and then we are at 9,000 disc for the buyers of mechanical parts. That's where I would park my buy, or try to park my buy order just above. And then, of course, if you've watched any of my trade videos before, what I do is go for small, tiny portions, so that people basically become impatient and say, you know what, I'm just going to get rid of that buy order as well, so that mine competing for 9,000 disk can still have a chance. So if you do, like for instance, 2,000 or less than 10,000 units at 9,200, still pay a decent premium here. These 14k at 9,751 I think will get filled pretty quickly as well. And then, you know, just have that investment done. Be willing to pay at least a slight premium with a small volume to make sure that you have your investment ready. Because if you can buy close to 9,000 disk, well, you're so much under the chart that it should be a pretty good investment longer term. Nuclear reactors next. Bit of volatility. What is disconcerting is the volumes here. Something like 600 in a day. That's absolutely terrible. So despite the fact that this margin has opened up very nicely, 110 for the sellers, 85,000 for the buyers, I would stay clear from nuclear reactors for now. Maybe buy like 100 of them or something like that. A tiny investment might still make sense, but here the volumes aren't there, so that is very risky. Organic mortar applicators, after a surprisingly strong summer going up to 1.2 million ISK, is now finally showing signs of stress as well. 1 million for the sellers, 940,000 ISK for the buyers. Let's get that visible on the chart. That's below everything as well. 1 year low point on the buy side at this point, and that's the pressure that has built up. You can see the lack of demand very obviously as well in the lack of buy orders. Potentially, you know, try to grab a organic mortar applicator for less than 950,000 disk. I think that's something that you would like to have ready for maybe a new structure or something like that. After that, we get to robotics, and here that's also fuel related, that is seeing the signs of it. We saw it happening in August as well, normalizing to less than 100,000 disk, back on the average price. Nice little performance here in June, July, up to 110,000, but now dropping off to a 1 year low point as well. 97,000 for the sellers, 90,000 disk for the buyers. Obviously, I think that you can try to grab some here as well. Again, that one warning though, don't go all out right now. This is still potentially something that will get worse as well through September. I think that basically new plans for EVE Online, bit of hype building as people you know, get out of their summer routines is what will mean the comeback here. So I don't think the bottom is necessarily here just yet, but some buying might make a lot of sense at this point. Self-harmonizing power cores normalizing to 2 million as well. 2 million, a bit above that for the sellers, just below that for the buyers, but again, not that many buyers here. The market says 2 million. It's actually a low enough price. I'm a bit surprised by that, since we went to 1.9 earlier in the year. Then we have the superconductors also showing the obvious strain and the lack of demand here. Let's see where the buyers are at. Getting back up to almost 10,000 disk. Sellers at 11,500 disk. So this is, well, basically last week you could probably have grabbed this for like less than 9,000 disk or something like that on a couple of these days, but we're just after that, unfortunately. So right now, I would be hesitating. I think we can obviously do better. Then we have test cultures that are trying to hold on. Buyers are at 7,000 disk, sellers at 8,200 disk. Not the very bottom either here. Really, honestly, considering what's happened since May, if you don't have your 6,000 disk test culture investment at this point, you just weren't gonna risk it anyways, and so you're a bit late to the party here. Then we have wetware mainframes, and this is the first advanced PI material where it is very noticeable. The price is going well below 2 million ISK all of a sudden. Sellers coming in at 1.9 to 1.95 million. Buyers are well below 1.9 million. This is also very, very pronounced, and potentially something that you should look into if you want that late summer PI investment. I mean, look at this chart. 1 year low point, super pronounced, less than 2 million. Haven't seen that all year, and you're in fact buying for less than 1.9 million by quite a bit. That one makes a lot of sense as well. So my summer prediction basically is becoming a fall prediction, with now we have the September slump materializing in a lot of the PI materials, creating opportunities. This is something, if you want to invest in something that potentially is going to mean a lot of risk, then this is the stuff. Especially these advanced PI materials, if you think CCP will come out with new structures, perhaps to counter the nullsec blackout, for instance, if you believe that the numbers are so bad that CCP is going to have to turn that around, then that would be one of the solutions. Then this makes a lot of sense to start your investments right now. In small volumes, so you still have some munitions left for even bigger dips. After that, we have the advanced moon materials coming in at 30 minutes. Let's take a look at those. Very difficult for me to make a prediction on this one because this is still generally dictated by nullsec, and well, you've got lower activity, but you also don't have that much destruction. How is all of this correlating to the advanced moon materials? Well, for now it looks, at least here in the crystalline carbonites, that we're holding on to that average 150, 155 for the sellers, 150 for the first buyer, 47, 48 for most of them. We're still doing quite okay, staying on our yearly average here. Ferrite carbide dropped off a little bit in the last week or so, went back to 137 on a couple of days. Still, the sellers are at 148. It's basically a bit of a lack of demand driving the price of buyers back down, but the average sell price is still decently good. After that, we have our titanium carbide that is also holding on to a price of around 200 disc, 201 for the sellers, 194 for the buyers. Not bad for the lack of activity and lack of action as well. No real big wars or anything like that happening in nullsec. And tungsten carbide is also a bit under pressure, but it's at 200 disc, which is actually a very reasonable price for tungsten carbide. Actually 200.48 for the sellers, 200.42 for the buyers. That's a super narrow margin. It's basically the market that is willing to pay this price for these goods. After that, we have our metamaterials. Photonic metamaterials, well, went up to 20,000 disc and has to give back a little bit of ground here. 18k for the sellers, 15,600 for the buyers. Does show that a bit of a lack of demand might be starting to creep into the advanced moon materials as well. Plasmonic metamaterials next went really well up to 25,000 discs, but I think that we're starting to lose some feathers. No, 25,300 for the sellers, but it's the buyers. Again, it's the demand that is dropping off to less than 22,000 discs for the plasmonic metamaterials. So a bit of pressure that is starting to show up here as well. Then we have our nonlinear metamaterials, also a bit of pressure, but nothing too bad just yet. 27,400 for the sellers, 25,000 for the buyers. Again, just a bit of margin opening up here. And then terahertz is actually dropping, but from a high point of 28,000, 25,000 for the sellers and 21,000 for the buyers. Again, bit of margin. So the metamaterials, I think, are showing a lack of demand. We still have some other advanced moon materials to cover. Here is fermionic condensate, not doing too well, staying at a bottom price of less than 90,000 disc. Let's take a quick look at ferrogel. This one is doing okay, I would say, meandering around a slightly above average price. 50,000 for the sellers, 47,000 for the buyers. That's not a lack of demand. That's doing well above average at this point. We still have fullerenes that's staying below 1,000 disc, so not much to say there. Very flat, in fact. Hypersynaptic fibers, bit of volatility, but again, this is the normal price range. 13,500 for most sellers, 13,000 almost for the buyers. That's pretty much right on the average. Nanotransistors actually still quite strong at 6,000 disc, well above average here on the lack of supply. 6k for the sellers, 6k for the buyers. Quite expensive. Then we have our phenolic composites holding strong at 22,250. Well, strong, actually one of the weaker performers, but to be able to still command almost 2,250 from the sellers and 2,000 for the buyers is actually not bad, considering the dips to almost 1,500 that we've had in March and May here. So it's still not great, but I would definitely call it close to the average. Then we have ceramic fibers. That's okay, bouncing off the 450, sometimes above 500, sometimes below that on the sellers, but doing quite alright to defend its price range as well. So the advanced mood materials actually feel decently balanced for now. On some of them though, we do see that specter of a bit of a lack of demand that starts to show up as well. Next up, Take-Two ships. Let's see if we can find some buy opportunities there. 34.25. The theory would be that the lack of destruction and well, Take-Two production is quite intense. It's also quite it requires quite a bit of organization, and it's not something that you just dismantle because it's summertime or because it's a tougher time in EVE Online. So I think that the lack of destruction might just mean a bit of oversupply in some of these ships. Let's see if I am right. Here is the Ares bouncing back actually a little bit in the tail end here, back to 27.5 million. 27 for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. So that's not a buy opportunity. We actually see decently strong demand for the Ares and holding on to a decent price, not a great price, but a decent price as well. After that, we've got the Basilisk, which went down in price in the last couple of weeks, but actually seems to be bouncing off 230. So it's 225 for the sellers, 217 for the buyers. Is that an opportunity? No, we can see that buyers go below 200 million on some occasions. So actually, to my surprise so far, it doesn't look like we have a lack of demand in Take-Two ships. Here is the Cerberus going down to 230 million ISK, but that's not especially bad. Surprise volume spike here as well. Sellers are at 236, buyers are at 216. All right, 216. Let's see if we can get something like that showing. Starts to be interesting, but it's obviously not a one-year low point just yet. So the Cerberus, bit of a lack of demand showing up, but it's not great just yet. Next up here we've got the Crow. Definitely not a lack of demand. 35 million for the sellers, actually at a high point at this point, and buyers are forced up to 29 million as well. Bit of margin, so it's not like it's super in demand, but nowhere near a buy opportunity at 25 million. Then we've got the Guardian staying flat at 230, right on its average. It's actually 225 for the sellers and 207, so it's mostly the sellers that are obviously dictating the price if we look at this chart. Then we've got the Heretic. Okay, that one, well, no, 70 million again. So nothing too special. Buyers though, complete lack of buyers for the Heretics, 50.6 million. Okay, if you're gonna buy a Take-Two ship and you're buying a Heretic for 50 million, I think that makes sense. But it is out of vogue. It has been struggling whole year basically. I thought we would see it come back a little bit with the Nullstick Blackout, but it doesn't. And yeah, there's just a complete lack of demand in the Heretic, causing that massive margin. It's not easy. You can see that the average price is on the seller side, but sometimes you have these data points indicating that there are impatient people out there that will sell that Heretic for close to 50 million ISK. So you can risk it. It's just not gonna be easy to grab one of those super cheap Heretics. After that, we've got the Hound, which went down to not a low point for me, but it's actually bouncing back up again as well. 34 million for the sellers, 29 million for the buyers. It's definitely a very reasonable price, actually, not bad at all. The Ishtar, though, that's a different story, heading back for that one-year low point. 195 million for the sellers, 183 for the buyers. That is very low. I'd say yes, especially if you want to have like an extra exploration Ishtar, something like that out there. It makes a lot of sense to grab at least one or so to have your investment somewhat ready, because this is a pretty sharp drop off. Buyers at 183 is very low on the chart as well, and there might be a comeback. I mean, Ishtar is definitely not a bad ship, so it's just not in the meta apparently, so that means you can grab a cheap one. The Manticore, again, doing really well, actually, staying well above 30 million ISK. Buyers, though, below 30, sellers at 33, which is a normal range if you look at it in the last couple of months at least. We'd love to see us drop to 28 before we try to grab them. Then we've got the Munin, went down, but from a one-year high point of almost 300 million ISK, you could say. going back down to slightly below average price, 246 for the sellers, 226 for the buyers. Okay, it's not that great, but it's not dramatic either. Then we've got the Nemesis. This one is dropping off, finally getting the chart close to 25 million. So unfortunately, the buyers, competing from 25 up to 25.3 million, sellers at 26 million. The margin is gone, but the buyers are not dropping off. Surprising to me personally that take to ship demand is still very much there. On Neros above 200 million, well above average despite the low volumes. There's obviously demand there as well. Then we get a Purifier holding on to 30 million with ease, despite that massive drop off. 31 for the sellers, 29 still for the buyers, despite that very sharp drop off from 50 million to 30 million. Quite often this overshoots by a lot because they're seeing purifiers at 50 million. People go crazy, they try to ride that wave down, and then you get so many ships on the market that you crash right through the defenses of 30 million. No, it just didn't happen. It just bounced right on that average price, and it's not budging from there. That shows strong demand for Tech 2 ships. Then we've got the Saber crawling out of the hole a little bit. It's still really not great. 68 for the sellers, 62 for the buyers. I'm guessing that we do have some investors that grab these really cheap ones at these low points. Then we have the Scimitar. That one is all of a sudden dropping off a cliff, heading for 200 million. All right, 207 for the sellers, 190 for the first buyer, then 184. Finally, one with a lack of demand. Lose one more buy order, and you're at 185, and that would make a lot of sense in my opinion. So this is one that you should, if you want that Scimitar investment, potentially keep a very close eye on that market, but it's really the only one so far. The Stiletto is down to 25 million as well, 27 for the sellers, almost 25 for the buyers. And then you see, look at that, 13, 20, 27 here. Investors are ready to snag these opportunities in a very short period of time. So the Tech 2 ship market, to my surprise, is doing quite well. Very, very strong actually, with apparently lots of people looking into it as well, because buy opportunities tend to be gone in no time or don't even materialize. Let's move on to the Tech 3 market next at 4110. Like that, and let's see how our destroyers are doing. The Confessor is holding on to 40 million ISK, decently flat here. We're talking 41 for the sellers, 36 million for the buyers, and look at these volumes. Nothing in the last 24 hours, 30, 26, 23. This is just okay, and we're basically stalling our production a little bit at the tail end, and the price is quite reasonable at this point. So nothing too crazy here in my opinion for the Confessor. Bit of a surprise that we don't see any of them come in the last 24 hours. After that, we've got the Hecate that is dropping off to 40 million ISK. That's basically immediately part of the reason, of course. Hecate was at almost 50 million for the whole month of August, so you're switching your production from Confessors to Hecates, of course, if you can, driving the price back down, and it's still at 41.7, still above the Confessor. 35 million for the buyers, quite a bit of margin opening up here, and you can see in the last 24 hours this is where the volumes are at, so that is still competition that is coming in here, but it's competing at 42 million, still a price higher than the Confessor, so this is quite normal. The volumes, we don't see like hundreds of them all of a sudden in a single sell order, so all of this still seems quite normal to me, perhaps a little bit too much, but keep in mind that well, it can use a bit of breathing room, and obviously some production in the Confessor will be needed soon. Then we've got the Jackdaw that is still staying well away from 40 million as well, actually a bit above that. I wouldn't say by too much, but 42 million almost on the average chart, so 42 for the sellers, 39 for the buyers. And here, last 24 hours, almost a full page, a little bit less than the Hecate. Well, obviously, I think the Hecate comes from 50 million, the Jackdaw comes from 45 million, so that is quite normal. And potentially, if you look at how much is coming in, I'm still not seeing oversupply or overshooting. So I see us all landing very nicely at 40 million ISK. Confessor perhaps going up a little bit on a lack of supply, and everything coming together basically at that price range. After that, we still have the Zwepel to take a look at. also going up to more than 40 million ISK. And so here what you see immediately, only 5 new sell orders, most of them with 1s, 20, 24, 33. All of this is quite reasonable, very balanced, and they're basically all finding their price on the seller side of things just above 40 million ISK. Very nice to see these spikes getting absorbed by normal market forces. You get an opportunity here in the Hecate. Well, that's the biggest opportunity. You get a full front page of new ships, so people are trying to take advantage of that. And eventually everything drops off, and this comes at a cost for the Confessor, for instance, that has then gone up in price from 35 to 40 million ISK. So normal market forces, if you're looking for what I would consider to be a healthy market that works as expected and that is not oversupplied but also completely out of the meta, and so there is no interest in it, then it is definitely the tactical destroyer market. 41 million seems to be the normal price for all of them. And so from that point on, right, if something shoots out, like you get a big demand for Hecates to perhaps take advantage of the Gnostic blackout, that's when you get a lovely spike up to 50 million ISK. Great opportunity for anyone that's actually in the industry of these ships. And then of course you need some time to absorb all of that, and so things are a bit volatile, but nothing crazy and nothing bad. Nobody's like losing their shirts or anything like that. Next up, we've got the cruiser market. Here is the Legion that's basically landing on 170 million ISK. It's 177 for the sellers, 157 for the buyers. So that's still a very big margin. Last 24 hours we do have some sell orders. Volume wise, nothing too bad. This feels like it's still okay. Then we have the Loki, slight downtrend heading towards 180 million on average. It's 181.6 for the sellers, 161 for the buyers. Again, a decent margin between buyers and sellers, showing lack of demand for sure. Fresh production, not that much here, but we have 11, 8, 18 here. This again feels like it's okay volumes for the Loki. Next up, we've got the Proteus, that's also flat at 160. 166 for the sellers, 155 for the buyers, bit less margin, but this is normal. This is the least popular tactical cruiser here. Last 24 hours, 1 of 15, but again, for the least popular one, these are normal volumes, I would say. And then we have the Tengu that actually went down in price a little bit from 180 to 170 for the sellers, and 146 for the buyers. That's very cheap for a Tengu actually, and this is on some fresh supply coming in, I think, competing from 174, 170, and now even below 170. So there's some active competition in the Tengu. Volume wise, I think we could take a look at that. Here's the Legion, so that's primed for manipulation, which I think this spike here was. Terrible volumes. Then we've got the Loki, that's a little bit better, so this is a more healthy chart in my opinion. Then we have the Proteus, very bad as well. Could be manipulated, but who is gonna bother with the Proteus? Probably not too many people. And then finally we have the Tengu that is still decently popular and also has a somewhat more healthy, in my opinion, outlook and competition when it comes to the sell orders over here. So the Tech 3 cruiser market, in my opinion, is suffering from a lack of interest in general in the game. It's just not as much in the meta as the much cheaper the tactical destroyers, and as a result there is this risk that these super low volumes can create market manipulation from time to time. That's a risk, well, that's part of the EVE Online sandbox experience, but basically is the reason why I am shying away from grabbing Tengus at less than 150 with the intention of selling them. So if it's to use them, sure, that's absolutely fine, of course, but to trade in this tactical cruiser markets for me feels a little bit too risky. And then finally we're gonna move on to the extra product, and we're gonna try to take a look at some Triglavian industry stuff, the stuff that drops from that new content, coming in at 4750. And then I need to find one of those ships first, I think. So let's maybe, we should have cruiser, then we have, let's see if I can, precursor cruiser, there we go. Let's go for, it's a Tech 1, so the Vetmac, right, that's been here for a while, I think. God damn it, let's click on this one then, and then we've got industry, and so you get the general minerals, but then you have stuff like this here, crystalline ice. I haven't seen that drop actually from from the new content in HiSec, but this has gone from around 400,000 discs to less than 100,000 discs, so that's a pretty big drop off over the last year. 85k for the sellers, 78k for the buyers. Next up, let's see what else, maybe the weapon or something, because this is precursor cruiser. Let's take a look at industry here. 0-point condensate, we could take a look at that as well. Not too bad, holding on just above 75k and still worth 75k. Haven't seen that dropped either. I think you have to go into the abyss to get these two materials for Tech 1 production. So I guess we take a look at what's needed for the Tech 2 one. Here is the Zarmast. Then we go for industry. This is more recognizable. Radiation absorption thruster. I'm actually going to put this like this so I can actually click on it after showing the map. It needs more fight. I think that's very important to note as well, right? Tech 2 ship production, you need more fight in there. That's why this is doing so well. We've got the radiation absorption thruster, definitely something that I have grabbed from the new content. Spiked up to 3 million, and now you can see the steady decline here. And at the moment, in fact, it is worth just 500,000 for the sellers, 400,000 disc for the buyers. Singularity radiation converters, something that we've seen as well. And let's take a look at that chart. Started at 2 million and is now very quickly going down to 180,000 for the sellers and the buyers. I think the pressure is going to continue. This obviously drops as well and is down to 55,000. And look at that, we started at 300,000 disc here, and then you get that nice progression down to the current price. These drop as well in pretty big volumes, and again you do see that pressure. Actually a bit of an uptick here, that's very interesting. 54,000 for the sellers though, 45,000 for the buyers. That value is dropping very quickly. And then I think this lattice locked Dicas, I'm not even gonna try here again, that just drops, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And this is worth, well, 230,000 disc, and you can see that the chart is trying to form itself around 300, 500k even, so this is under pressure as well. So it's all tied to Tech 2. That is interesting. That is something that is not, I would say, that normal for the Tech 2 production cycle, which to me makes it far more interesting and accessible, of course, that you can, you don't have blueprint originals for these things. You need to make those from blueprint copies, which is quite intense to do as well. It's part of that economy, but that's these products for Tech 2 industry can just be salvaged from content that's available to anyone. Does mean that these will become very, very available. If I take a look at, I think this one was a very nice chart here. It starts out at 3 million, and you can clearly see the pressure with all the new content that CCP has brought in. You can also see the volumes increase. Let's see if we can find that across the board. Yeah, look at that volume increase here. The availability just going up with the new content. Not so much in the 0-point field manipulators, but very noticeable in the singularity radiation converters and in the radiation absorption thrusters, two of what were the more valuable drops and salvages from the new Triglavian content. And I honestly think that it's basically part of CCP's plan here. The Triglavians have from time to time been described as the 5th race to come to the game. And so I personally still think that CCP has plans to bring like full ship lines from the Triglavians, all the types. You can see that we have Tech 2 ships now. I think we'll see capitals eventually. All of that I think is in the works, and so they're trying to make this a full economy that works. That's within reasonable price ranges as well. If you make all of this just the instanced content from the Abyss, I don't think that that will generate enough interest across the board to make this a healthy economy and make these ships readily available, just like ships are readily available for all the other races. And you can clearly see that the volumes have gone up substantially, which means that while this new content, like that new conduit, is like a super money maker right now on the first couple of days, the worth of it is going to drop like a cliff and is no longer going to be I think that competitive for a HiSec anomaly. I think it's gonna normalize basically, while right now though it's actually pretty great. A couple of trade trips can make you a lot of ISK if you still sell on time. But I think that this trend is just going to continue. Volumes are going to go up, availability is going to go up, and as a result the prices should go down. Perhaps we'll take a quick look at that as well as part of this segment. For instance, what is the Vedmak price now? You can clearly see that we've gone down from last year, from 250 million ISK to far more reasonable, less than 100 million ISK for the sellers. The Rodiva is very new but very quickly dropped off to 70 million ISK, very doable. And then if, for instance, we go for the advanced precursor cruisers, we should find that as well, although it's apparently like that. Here is the Ikitursa, super new as well, so that makes it a little bit harder to do for the Tech 2 ships. But let's take a quick look here. 400 million ISK, yeah, and then the Minmatar, let's compare to Munin 245. So we still have a ways to go, but I basically think that CCP is bringing all that new content to do exactly that. They don't want the Ikitursa to necessarily be a super expensive ship that most people are not going to risk. They want to bring that much more in line with a normal heavy assault cruiser price, which seems to be around 250 million ISK, and that is why availability of all of that triclave industry stuff is going up substantially with the new content that they're bringing in and that they're not even putting in the patch notes. Anyways, that's going to be it for this EVE Talk then, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much as well for 19,000 subscribers on the channel. Amazing milestone. I am super happy. With a bit of luck, we could actually get to 20k by the end of the year. That would be mind-blowing for me personally. So thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much for all of your support as well. And I'll see you all next time.